Good morning, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to this week's weekly energy boost. My name is Elisheva, and this beautiful Monday morning, I have the privilege of being joined by one of our, I'm sure he's going to be one of your favorite guests. He's definitely one of my favorite people. I'm joined this morning by Yehuda Yeshurun, who is one of the teachers in Los Angeles. He has a special qualification to be here with me this morning, and I'll get to that in a minute. The weekly energy boost is a 7-day spiritual energy forecast in which we share with our listeners the most powerful and practical tools and wisdom to help you navigate the coming week. Inevitably, through those teachings come life lessons that can be used any day of the week, any week of the year, any year of your life. And the fun, cool thing about this week is that we are shifting from the energy of Libra to the energy of Scorpio. And for the last year or plus, actually, we've been focusing on monthly themes, which inevitably interweave with the weekly energy as well. And this week, as we enter the month of Scorpio, it's actually Wednesday and Thursday, the astrological month of Scorpio on the Kabbalistic calendar. I am well aware that doesn't coincide with the conventional calendar. But we know that when the astrological month moves according to Kabbalah, we all become a little bit of that sign. And so as Scorpios are fabulous, amazing, wonderful human beings, we're all going to be a little bit more fabulous, wonderful, and amazing. But different challenges come up for us as well. And one of them centers around control. By the way, Scorpios, they may have control issues, but the truth is they're really good at managing, and I don't want to use the word control, but they have really great skills when it comes to overseeing things, managing teams, projects, etc. The problem is that without spirituality, that can become a little bit scary and manipulative sometimes, and dark, and I don't want to use any other adjectives anymore. So we're going to focus this month on family. Now, the reason we're focusing on family is, first of all, family is very important to the sign of Scorpio. It is maybe the most important thing to them. But also because in our own lives, if we're honest, family tends to be a huge opportunity to control, or to be controlled, or feel controlled, or let go of control. And so every week this month, we're going to focus on a different aspect, a different angle of being a participant in a family, willingly or otherwise, because we also acknowledge that even though some of us are born, and we're going to talk about this in one of our upcoming episodes, we may not even feel connected to our family. And what does that mean? Regardless, in order to be a person on a planet, one is biologically brought into the world by people who are, on a technical level at least, considered family, whether we feel it emotionally, spiritually, energetically, physically or not. So we want to understand why that is part of the universal construct, how it can serve us, how it can hurt us, and how we can use it as the spiritual tool it was intended to be. A little background on that also. For those of you that have been listening for a period of time, you know that my family, my biological and spiritual family, came to the study Kabbalah when I was just 14 years old. So I have been on this journey, willingly or otherwise, for a very long time. I wasn't so willing. I think once I turned 16, it took me a couple of years to adjust to it and to embrace it rather than make fun of it. And as a result, I came to understand and embrace over a period of time, I think, not only spirituality, but the role that my family plays in my life, and then going on to get married and have my own kids, etc., that took on a whole different level as well. So we want to understand really in the big picture today, how our family, what is family, what can we use it for, how have we been misusing it perhaps, and some of the gems that are lying in those familial relationships. So our guest today, and I don't know if he's probably going to be here again. I have a feeling that he's not going to be a one-trick pony with us. But Yehuda, one of the unique things he does, or he is, aside from being a fabulous human being, an amazing teacher and student and friend and neighbor, he is also the son and brother to Kabbalah teachers. He is part of a family of Kabbalah teachers. And so his parents were Kabbalah teachers when he was born. I'm not going to tell you how many years ago, but it was a long time ago. And as such, he brings with him, I think, not only the wisdom having learned it, but also the wisdom having experienced it, being raised by people who embody and also lead their lives with this wisdom. So no disrespect to David or David's family, also beautiful, wonderful people, but Yehuda is special, and we want to acknowledge that and take advantage of it for the next 45 minutes or so. So, Yehuda, welcome. I know I kind of sprung this on you with not a lot of preparation, or, one of the things we don't do is prepare very much for these episodes, because it tends to bring down, the talking tends to drag if we've already talked about it before. So I know I have my notes and what I think is important to share, but I want to start with you and see what you think is important to share. So take it away.
Thank you, Elisheva. Well, like you'd mentioned, I quite literally am a product of being raised in not just a spiritual environment, but a spiritual home, spiritual parents, spiritual brother. Although growing up, maybe we weren't as spiritual as we are now. And there are many lessons to that. But when it comes to the idea of family, the idea of a spiritual home or the people around us, the first thing that comes to mind, and I kind of wish there's a book here. I kind of wish I would have brought a different volume of the Zohar with me, because there's a really beautiful section that speaks about this exact idea of what the purpose of family spiritually is in our life. And it's okay if I go into like biblical stories, right? We're okay with that?
Go for it.
Fantastic. So you may or may not know, but there's a relatively famous story in the beginning of the Bible, in the book of Genesis, about Abraham, who God tells him, at the age of 75 years old, he says, you should leave your homeland, your father's house, and your country. So, and then just go wherever I will tell you to go. And one of the things that we learn in Kabbalah and spirituality, and specifically what the Zohar does, this foundational book of spiritual wisdom from 2,000 years ago, helping us to decode these messages into what they mean practically in our life today, is that this is a message about our life. And these are 3 areas in our life where we need to break certain boxes, certain, we can call it belief systems, or the way we look at life. One of them is what is written in the Bible as our Father's house, meaning where we grow up, our parents, our siblings, all create a view of our life that may or may not be real. Based on the way I'm treated, based on the way that I'm talked to, I create a reality in my life where I think this is how things should be. And that's not always not just true, but limiting to who I can be, what my potential is. So the first idea of family is really an ability for us, once we understand what that message is, to recognize our potential. That is ultimately our family's purpose, is to help us get to our potential. Now, sometimes that's very challenging. We're not always in a spiritual, there are many people in the world don't grow up in a spiritual home.
I think most people don't.
Most people, right? I'm one of the lucky few, although we'd mentioned astrology in Scorpio and Libra. When I did an astrology chart not that long ago, one of the things they'd mentioned was the reason why I'm in this life in the position that I am in is because in all of my previous lives, I just didn't get it. I was just not spiritual enough that they said, well, if you don't get it now, there's just no hope for you.
Oh, lovely.
Right?
Oh, very uplifting.
So our family is meant in different ways when we understand that, and that dynamic changes and evolves constantly. All right? I'm not the same with my parents or my brother the way I was 5 years ago or 10 years ago, even though I've always grown up in a spiritual home, because I'm different. I change. My family changes all the time. All right? But that idea is that we're here to maximize and manifest our potential. And that's what family is there to help us achieve, whether they do it willingly or not. And that, that's a different story, right? But that's what we need to understand, is that our family is there to help us grow.
Right. And that's one of the basic teachings around that, is that our soul, before coming to the physical world in every lifetime, seeks out the best family to install what's needed to achieve one's potential. So that a lot of people say, well, why would, I went through X, Y, and Z, it was terrible, whatever, when I was a kid, why would I choose that, right? Or why would I choose to be born to a father who leaves? Or why would I choose to be born to this couple if anyway my grandparents were going to raise me? Or, you can look at a lot of places in the world where children are treated horribly. Why would their soul choose that environment? It's important to remember with that idea, and it ties into what Yehuda was saying, is that the soul isn't looking for comfort and ease and smooth, uneventful carnivals of life. The soul is concerned with us fulfilling our potential, for us fulfilling our purpose. So let's say, for example, if a soul in a particular lifetime decides that this is the lifetime, in Yehuda's case, his soul said, okay, this is the lifetime I must become spiritual. I need to choose this family to be born into because I won't have a choice, technically. He obviously does have a choice, but it'll be it'll be in the air he breathes, it'll be in the food that he eats, it'll be in the detergent in the laundry machine. There will be so much spirituality around him, he'll just have to cling to it. But, maybe for others of us, we chose to work on patience, or in another lifetime, we might choose to focus on stubbornness or laziness. And when I say focus on, it doesn't mean to be stubborn. It's to be programmed to be stubborn so that we can overcome it. So we might choose parents that have those issues or experience those challenges so that we end up either emulating them or saying, I'm going to be the complete opposite of my parent, etc. But the point the emphasis of what I'm saying is more not don't look at your parents and blame them for everything, but rather to understand your soul chose them to install a particular software on a conscious level, right? It was always a part of the soul level, but our childhood, which includes not only our parents, but their religion, their social status. I don't mean social, I mean, okay, also social status, but I meant financial situation, their religion, their, the scars that they have from their own upbringing, the values that they instill. That's all part of even where you grew up physically, what city were you in, what country were you in, that's all part of the installation effectively of your buttons. And that's one of the reasons that our parents are so good at pushing our buttons, is because they're the ones who helped install them, right? So they know exactly where they are, because they're really, it's their spiritual responsibility to set us up for doing our soul's work.
Right. And by the way, it's not a guarantee that if you grow up in a spiritual home or environment like I did, that it's going to be easy and simple, right? There were many right. challenges growing up. I went to 13 different schools in the 12 years that you're legally supposed to be in school. There were many different things that happen that are all about creating a way for us to be the person we're meant to be. And it's never going to be just easy or simple, regardless of who you are or where you are, because our soul chooses a specific environment and just that way that will be personalized to each and every one of our soul's mission.
Well, it's also important to, I think, mention that even though our soul chooses those parents, that we also end up incarnating in the same group over and over and over again. What that really means is that in one lifetime, you may be the parent, and in another lifetime, you may be the child or the sibling or the husband or the wife, meaning because we accumulate baggage with other people. So for example, let's say, it's an extreme example, very sort of Hollywood. In one lifetime, you steal your sister's boyfriend and marry him. So you may need to come back either as sisters again, or maybe as the boyfriend that got stolen to be stolen back to the original. Like we end up creating these energetic connections with people that sometimes don't get resolved in a single lifetime, and therefore they need to be resolved in this is ending up being a reincarnation episode, and that they need to be resolved in a future lifetime. Also, because we create those bonds, we may agree to continue to come back with people, to continue to support and to love and to participate in life with them. So there's all different kinds of reasons why we may keep coming back again and again. One of the things that I think about, and now that I'm thinking about the timing of this episode, it's also good for going into like the holidays. I didn't realize it originally, but in November and December, a lot of people, if they can, they're getting together with family. And, in my family specifically, I don't know about yours, we don't have a lot of aunts and uncles and cousins. We're like a very sort of our family and my brother and his family, and also with my parents, it was like they didn't have big families either, so we don't have a lot of cousins and aunts and uncles. So there's not a lot of family to get together with. But I know people who have like 80 cousins, and they're getting together, or maybe pre-pandemic, we're getting together, and holiday events and birthdays, and that's also a different opportunity, right? Families that have less siblings, and therefore then less aunts and uncles and cousins that are around all the time. And there's also some families that place a greater emphasis on family, and there's a lot of guilt and, again, manipulation, controlling. And there's other families that it's kind of like, we lived together for a while and now we don't, and we're good friends and we love each other and we talk on the phone, but there's none of that burden, I want to call it. Maybe that's because I was raised. It seems like it would be a burden to have the 80 different people to call at every birthday and every holiday and every, I don't know, just it's interesting that not only we choose the actual people we may share a home with, but we choose the periphery characters as well, and what kind of different situation it is when you have a whole cast of characters like that, and when your movie just doesn't require that. There's a lot to learn about looking at those details as well.
Yeah, we'll probably talk about, you will probably talk about this in one of the later episodes, but there's in my family, there's the four of us, as my parents, my brother and I, and we're the Kabbalah teachers, and literally everybody else, and it's more or less 80 cousins and aunts and uncles and all, like huge group of people who all live in Israel, are for a long time, most of them really were actually not spiritual at all. And there's a challenge in navigating that kind of relationship, because you're in a different place. You react to situations in a very different way, or you don't react at all, right? You're more proactive. And so it becomes challenging. And then there are just people who just don't want you to be spiritual at all. I love my grandparents. But for a very long time, my grandma would just always ask me, why are you a Kabbalah teacher? You're so smart. You could be a doctor. You could be a lawyer. You could do literally anything you want. Why are you doing this? Now she just asks me when I'm getting married. So we've moved on to...
She's accepted the fact.
She's accepted the fact that I'm a Kabbalah teacher. So there are ways to sort of navigate that. And we're not going to talk about that now, because you'll probably...
Next week, I think we're going to talk about that.
Right. So, but it's a very interesting thing to look at why, and to ask the question. You may not get an answer right away, but why did my soul choose this kind of family, not that kind of family? That question is so important, that why. Because you only get answers when you ask why. So
that, I think, is what really demands most of our attention today, is what can we learn about ourselves from our family? And for most people, that's a very painful question to ask, because I think it's a lot, you can look at your family and say, we were raised to be generous and kind and giving, but we also have these skeletons in the closet, or we have these behaviors, things that we are not necessarily proud of. And I think for all of us going into this month and looking at what the opportunities are for us as individuals, right? One of the things that happens actually when you start to study spirituality is we start to diagnose other people's challenges, right? And I share this sometimes. I'm sure I've shared it on the show. You know, my daughter will sometimes come home from school and she'll say, Mom, you know, today Michael was really listening to his opponent, right? So we've heard, unless this is your first episode tuning in, you've heard us talk about the force of the opponent. It's both a universal force and a force within each individual. It's not us. And one of the tricks it plays on us is to get us to think it is us. It is that voice inside us that challenges us to be our lowest self so that we can overcome it and become our highest self. So when she sees a kid acting out, she's able to identify, okay, they must be listening to their opponent, but she's maybe less inclined to focus on when she's listening to her own opponent. So, you know, when we embark on a spiritual journey and suddenly we find ourselves back in an old position, we go home or we spend time with people that knew us before our spiritual journey began.
Or when we were much younger in our spiritual journey.
There you go.
In my case.
For us as well, by the way, you know, I think I started to really embrace my journey. I think I was a junior in high school. So I went through a thing with my friends that, you know, you're not going to hang out with us anymore. You don't do these things anymore. You don't. And it wasn't that I suddenly became a nun or a priest or something. It was just that like Yehuda said, the things that got me reactive before weren't making me reactive. My interest shifted and I was just not the same person in a good way, which when you're not doing positive things, it's not necessarily, you stop being the funnest person to be around. But anyway, my point is that there is a part of us that says, well, I want to stay away from next week's topic, but there's a part of us that goes back into that environment and says, I don't like those things, or I'm embarrassed, right? I'm embarrassed actually that I remember my grandparents driving me to school and like me literally like ducking so that you couldn't see me in the window driving with my grandparents in their banana colored Cadillac. But now I'm mortified that I would do such a thing. But the idea that I was embarrassed by them, that there was something that they do or the way they live their life or their awesome car. I think it's awesome. Back then it wasn't so awesome. That I would be embarrassed or offended or want to hide. And it's really in those parts of our families that we can grow the most. And I want to challenge all of us. And, you know, my desire in that moment, let's go back to 80s, 90 something, early 90s. Let's say 1990. My grandfather is driving me probably in a 70s banana colored Cadillac to high school, to junior high or high school, whatever it was. And I am in complete denial that I come from an immigrant family, right? That they're so uncool that I'm going to actually, in a way, betray what I know is the right thing to do because I am so trying to hide that part of that part of me. Let's be honest. My grandparents, my ancestry is a part of me. So what about me or what about them can teach me about myself? Now, one of the things I used to be embarrassed about my grandparents is they always raised their voice. Like that when they were talking, it sounded like they were fighting. And I used to be scared initially. And then my father told me, because I didn't understand the language they were speaking, that that's just how they talk, right? They're very passionate, Eastern European. It's a very musical language. And what I realize now about myself is I also raise my voice a lot more than necessary, right? And I'm using that as an example. Maybe it's a funny example. Yehuda's laughing. It's not that funny. I am a very vocal parent. I'm not a grandparent yet. I'm sure I'll be a vocal grandparent as well. I tend to raise my voice and a lot. And I'm hypersensitive to other people who do it because I do it. And that's the diamond. This is the gem we're looking for within our families, is that the things that bother us most about our families bother us because we have some aspect of it within us. Now, do I fight? Do I raise my voice at my husband constantly the way my grandmother did with her? No, it shows up for me in a different way. But the universe has brought it to my viewfinder so that I will take it as a spiritual lesson. There's actually, I think it's in the Talmud, there's a great story about a guy who, I'm trying to remember that he's famous for calling people, do I have it written down here? Yes. Oh, I do. So he calls people slaves. Like, that's his insult. You're a slave. Oh, you're a slave. So, now I see the story. There's a traveler who was always calling other people slaves and insulted one of the sages. The sage called the traveler a slave, citing this phrase that basically the sculptor sculpts in his own defective image. That's the phrase. But the funny thing is that even though that traveler argued and said, no, but I come from a lineage of kings, blah, 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 it actually turns out that a few generations before, he was a descendant of slaves, meaning he called everybody a slave because he himself was actually the slave. So the idea is that we can gain, the universe doesn't give us a letter when we come to the world that says, dear Elisheva, please focus on transforming the following 5 traits and you will accomplish your soul's purpose. It comes to us through the messengers in our life, which is most effectively our family. It may come with other people later on down the line, but at least for the first 20 years, the main messengers for us are our family. So I'm inviting you guys as an exercise, especially in this first week of Scorpio, to look at the people who are closest to you, your family members. You know, I'm thinking of somebody who'd be like, oh, my dad is such an angry person. You know, yes, he is angry, but chances are you have anger, and your anger is justifiable, by the way. That's the way that the universe works. Your opponent will tell you, but I am right to be angry at the system, at the government, at my neighbors, at whoever you're mad at. The ex, right? It's very easy to get mad at your ex. You have all the reasons to be mad. But know that those qualities you're constantly choosing those people to be your mirrors because they are the ones who hold the keys to your transformation, as annoying and painful as that is.
Yeah, one of the things growing up, and we'll talk about raising spirit. You'll talk about raising spiritual.
We might
children.
just have to have you in the room so that we can, so that you're not lying.
In one of the next few weeks, but one of the things growing up that my dad used to tell my brother and I all the time was and this is something that he had asked his teacher, Rav Berg, why do bad things happen to good people? Or why don't good people see results in their life if they're good people? And the answer in the lesson is that we make 2 fundamental mistakes in life. The first one is we're not here to be good people. We're here to be better people. And the second mistake people make is that they think we're here to be better than other people, but we're not. We're here to be better than ourselves. And by looking at the reflections of who we are around us, specifically in this context as family, whenever my brother and I would fight, how can I be a better person because of this interaction? What about me can be better? Right? Growing up, I almost hate to call him out because he's actually transformed. He really doesn't do this much anymore. Much. No, but he used to do it all the time. But he was always late for everything. Anytime we'd have like a family trip, we're all ready and he's like still 10 minutes away from being able to leave the house. But every single time. And this was like a recurring theme just in my life of people in my life who are just always late. I'm always early and everyone else is late, very, very late.
I'm so fascinated with this because this is so my issue too. I am you and everyone else is late. Okay, go on.
But one of the things that I learned, and it was relatively recent, it wasn't growing up with my brother that I learned this. It took me a while to really process this idea, is that the reason why I always feel like people are wasting my time by being late is because I waste my time. I'm not using my time properly. And as soon as I started doing that, either the people in my life stopped being late, or it just didn't bother me anymore. It stopped being this just awful, awful thing that always happened. I stopped being a victim, right? But that's what we can learn from family. It's not about changing them. We're not here to change them. Again, we'll talk about that next week. But we're here to change ourselves and be a better version of ourselves constantly. And when I can look at someone and not judge them for who they are, but find that inside of me and say, how can I change that? That's how family helps us grow. This is one of the ways.
Can you think of something else that your parents taught you that you can share with us? I mean, I have lots of things I can share, but I like this vibe.
The other thing that they always shared, and this your older son will probably also be able to quote, because my dad taught in the Kabbalah Children's Academy many, many years ago. But one of the things that the Kabbalists share is that we are here for only one purpose. Our soul is here for one purpose. And my dad would repeat this over and over and over again to my brother and I growing up. We are here to learn to love other people. And when you can reframe your life with that understanding that I'm here because what that means is I'm a force of love. It's concealed. There are many barriers preventing me from not just experiencing the love, but being able to express that love especially to the people who I can't break away from because they're family. You can't, you can, but it's so much harder to leave family as opposed to friends or coworkers. You can always just get another job. You can just stop hanging out with people like in high school, but it's so much more difficult to escape your family as much as sometimes we want to. But we're here to be able to express love. And that's what our family can help us do. And that doesn't mean, we hug everybody or all the time, because sometimes it needs to be tough love, right? Whatever that means for specific situations. But we're here to be able to express that innate nature within us. That's why we're here. And every interaction we have, especially with family, is a way to build and expand the force of love that we have within us.
So you bring up, I often try to be the voice of the audience on the weekly energy boost, and I can hear over the radio waves. People are thinking, well, Yehuda, that's very beautiful. You have a spiritual set of parents and a spiritual brother, but in my family, there are people who don't deserve to be loved. How do you reconcile the fundamental concept that we are here to become beings of sharing, and there are people who I perceive, right? And this is part of what I'm leading the witness here. My perception is they do not deserve my love.
So what's the question?
What do? You have bad people in your family. You have selfish people in your family. I mean, we've gotten questions over the years about people who are fighting with family over inheritances, wills, trusts, custody over children. I mean, I know someone who, actually a student of mine brought this to my attention. She has a challenge with her sister, and she loves her sister very much, but her sister is making really bad choices. Sister A perceives Sister B's choices to be very bad right now. What does she do? So the reason I'm saying it is because, yes, we are here to be beings of love. It's really who we are, and we're really here to remove the barriers and the blockages that prevent us from feeling it and expressing it. But what about that part of us that tells us not to give love? Or, yes, I'll love the people who deserve my love, but not the people who don't.
My mind is going in a lot of different directions right now. I'm going to try and, because we're talking about hours and hours and hours of discussion, and every individual is so specific, right?
No, I don't want you to answer that question, but it's like, what am I supposed to do? Are we saying, yes, you love them anyway?
Well, what does it mean to love someone?
That's where you go. Go for it.
All right.
Catch that wave.
So So I was sort of thinking there's a short story that I wrote that you're familiar with, the Soul and the Promise, that where the fundamental idea and basic concept is we can only express our innate gifts when we're met with their exact opposite, right? Someone who is patient isn't patient because they're always around people who are nice and friendly and awesome and amazing. They're patient, and you can see that patience. That patience is expressed when people are pushing their buttons and getting on their nerves, and they're just not reacting. They're very patient. We can be patient with kids. We can be patient with people, with friends, with family, whoever it is. That same thing applies to love. But to love someone doesn't mean to want to change them, right? We're not here to change other people. To love someone means to, first of all, accept their process. All right, and you know, in the case maybe of perceiving someone else's perceived incorrect decisions in life, whether it's a sister, family, whoever it is, we can just accept that they just need to go through their process. But sometimes it's also, you know, there are people in our life who, you know, just abusive, right? I have a student who, his father is terribly, terribly abusive to him, but he can't leave because his father needs health care and there's no one to take care of his father. And the house that he lives in is under his father's name. And if he puts him in a home, he has nowhere to live. So he's stuck, right? Like, what are you doing? Like, you can't really be too spiritual in that situation, right? But when we talk about love isn't, and this is something else that I learned growing up. Whenever I'd throw a tantrum, as a very, very, very small child, not anymore. One of the things my dad would do is he would take me outside the house and he would tell me, I love you very much. I love you. I love your soul. I don't love your actions right now. So when you're ready to leave your actions outside of the house, you can come back inside. But know that I love you. There's nothing wrong with you, but your actions are not very spiritual right now. They're not very positive right now. They're not filled with love. And then he would not really close the door, right? But he would to me, it looked like the door was closed. I was 2 years old, 3 years old. And every 10, 15 seconds, he would check on me and say, do you want to leave your actions behind? And I'd be like, no. All right. So he would close the door again. And we do this until I'd get to a point where I was able to, physically mime throwing out my opponent, so to speak. But that's what it means to love someone, is to love them, but understand that they are not their actions. Their soul is not their actions. There's an opponent, and everyone is in a different process in their life, right? But we're here to learn to love the soul of somebody else in front of us. What we see isn't their soul, right?
It's true, and I think in those, when you understand family relationships through this lens, that the greater the challenge or the more challenging the relationship, the greater the opportunity is for my personal growth, not the other person's personal growth, right? That's, I'm making a judgment call by saying they deserve or they don't deserve. But what's interesting is in that, if you take out the microscope and you look at that scenario, what are we really saying? That somehow I have the belief that by me withholding my love, they'll feel punished and want to change, right? That there is this somehow, I think we have it maybe more with kids than we do, or maybe with our partners, right? That we think, I'm going to show you I dislike your behavior by withholding love from you, and you're going to miss my love so much, it'll make you stop doing what I don't like, and then I'll be able to love you again.
I'll stop washing the dishes so you learn to start washing the dishes.
Exactly. Or I'll stop being warm and loving so that you will learn that towels need to be picked up off the floor. I think that the overarching theme here is that I'm not here to change anybody but myself. And that by changing myself, I actually ensure the best odds for the other person to step into their change as well. And I think without, it's recognition, that's the word. Once we begin to recognize that every person in our movie serves a purpose, and we begin to be curious about the purpose. Nobody is there by accident. Nobody's an extra. Nobody is random. Nobody is there by mistake. When we're able to recognize or be curious about what can I learn, how can I grow, this person is here for me. What can I do with it? Sometimes it is just as simple as loving them for who they are. That this person can help me get to a greater place of compassion, of empathy, of warmth. And maybe that's it. And it can be that simple. Many times when it's with people who are closest to us, it's more complicated than that. And there are more layers and there is more karmic debt there. But like I mentioned about my daughter who is able to diagnose inflamed opponents in others, it's another benefit to raising spiritual children is that they use the weaponry against you, is that we want to make sure that we are focusing on ourselves. What can I get out of it? Not what can the other person get out of it. And maybe that changes when you're looking at, we'll talk about kids specifically, but one of the things that when you find your other half and you have children, you realize how much more directly your growth or lack thereof affects others. I think when I look at my parents and my brother, who again, my brother is also married to, my brother's wife's family is also her brother is, and his wife actually work in the center as well. It's all around us, but being spiritual doesn't exempt you from the work. It doesn't give you a free pass. It doesn't mean that there aren't idiosyncrasies and challenges and quirks and, that's the person that does this or doesn't do this, or this person, in many families, there's the person that they're always invited, but they never come, right? Everybody has shtick or stuff, as we say. But our goal in this week, or I should say this month, is to help all of us open our eyes to the degree that we are willing, at least, to embrace our family as teachers, as mirrors. And when I say teachers, I mean not that your mom or your sister is there to teach you a lesson, so to speak, although they may feel like they are. It's really, how can I use these scenarios and these situations as a platform to growth and not try and control them? I think a lot of us have the family that we are when no one is looking, and then the family we have when we're in public with them, right? That we have a kind of PR version of our family, our public forward-facing family, and then the family we are in the attic, so to speak. And, we would never talk that way if anybody else was around. We wouldn't behave that way if anybody else was around. I don't know about you guys, but growing up, we're not an argumentative group of people. My family, the family I was born into, we are water and earth signs exclusively. So our form of dealing with disagreement or conflict is silence. We close doors. Sometimes we slam them, but rarely. We just shut down until we've rebooted. And when we reboot, we pretend like nothing happened. Then my first serious relationship was with a fire sign. The fire sign is the epitome of not being quiet. Most fire signs are just that, fiery. They'll burn the place down if it's needed to resolve it. And water signs are just like, let's keep it tranquil. Let's not rock the boat. And it was a huge learning curve for me to not only to handle that energy, but also to borrow it. That maybe I could be a little bit more rocking the boat. I could say what I was thinking when I was thinking it and not write it down in my diary for my eyes only, kind of thing. So, there are always going to be difficult situations, and those difficult situations are not punishments. They're opportunities. And when we start to look at our family as another opportunity, we actually start to enjoy them more. I don't want to make it sound like it's going to be school 24 hours a day. There is actually joy and pleasure once you stop treating your family as a burden or as a punishment and start to recognize it as an opportunity.
Yeah, and it can be difficult specifically with family as opposed to other people in our life who provide us opportunities for growth, is because we think we know our family and We know all of their issues and insecurities and all of their opponents, so to speak. So therefore, I don't have to listen to you, or why should I listen to the message you're trying to give me? You have all of this other stuff that, but there's a beautiful quote from the Talmud that says, I'll quote it in the original Hebrew, Ezeu hachacham halomed mikol adam. Who is considered wise? One who learns from every person. That includes family. That includes the people
that you don't want to learn
that you don't want to learn from. Exactly. The one, and that's sort of the thing, because if you really think about it, if someone handed you an envelope with $1 million check inside, and the envelope was dirty and gross and looked like it had been, sifted from mud and garbage and all of that.
Coffee stains.
Like, you wouldn't care what the envelope looked like as long as the check went into the bank and they accepted it.
As long as the cash was there.
As long as the money's there, you don't care what the envelope looks like. We often look at the messenger and say, oh, the messenger is a bad human being, forgetting the fact that it's not always the truth, but the messenger is bad, and therefore the message is also bad, or the message is not true or not relevant to me. And that's where we have to shift our view of family, is that we all have issues. We're all working on ourselves and have things that we need to change. What's the message for me? Forget the messenger. The messenger is not important. The message is what's important.
Last thoughts before I wrap up the episode. I know you were writing while I was talking, so I want to hear what you wanted to say.
Well, I wrote a whole bunch of things that might take an entire...
Okay, you have 4 minutes, let's say.
4 minutes. I will say that although we've been focused exclusively on biological family almost, there's an entire trope of story writing called found family. It's very prevalent, obviously, in YA writing, but it's the idea that we can create an environment of our family, the people we're not biologically related to, and that's also important, to choose the people we're around, because biological family, although we say yes, my soul chooses them, once we're like fully conscious human beings, we can't really choose to say, oh, I don't want you as my mom, you're my new mom now. Like, that doesn't work like that. Biologically, you're still related, right? But yeah, we do choose that environment, but it's also so important to actually choose the people who we call family, right? And that's one of my favorite things about working in the Kabbalah Center and being a Kabbalah teacher, is that you're surrounded by a spiritual family, even if you're not biologically related, because you're always being pushed in a positive way to grow. You're always seeing people change, and you say, I want that. I want to be more like that. And that's really, I mean, I'll get super controversial and then cut off because we've almost got no time. That's one of the things that the founder of the Kabbalah Center, Rav Ashlag, says is the only free will we have is to choose the people and environment we're in. Everything else will happen on its own, but the people we choose to be around,
everything will be an extension of that.
But the only free will we have is choosing the people that are around us.
It's true. And I think that one speaking apropos controversial, people get really upset when they sit in class and they hear that they chose their family, right? Well, I actually even had it out with a fellow Kabbalah teacher once, because that was a concept they refused to accept. They said, why would I choose the parents I chose and not choose Rav and Karen Burke to be my teacher, to be my parents? And that goes back to the idea that our perception is that I want comfort. My soul wants me to be happy and for life to be easy and fancy-free. And what my soul really wants is for me to shed the layers of baggage I've accumulated over my lifetime so that my true, loving, and radiant soul can shine. And this is the environment that my soul chose to take the coal and transform it into a diamond. And it might not be comfortable, but my soul isn't looking for ease and comfort. My soul is looking for the fastest path to my transformation and my elevation. Full stop. And so I think that for all of us, again, that are trying to control the narrative, You know, my childhood was terrible, but I've risen above it. Or the odds were against me, but somehow I managed. Or maybe the narrative is the opposite. I had a terrible childhood, and that's why my life is so miserable now. I'm not saying that is. I had a pretty awesome childhood. But the idea that the roots that we, or the fertilizer that we were raised in, that we grew from, was actually perfect for what our soul needed to do is a difficult pill to swallow. I'm inviting everybody else to do that this week. And one of the things that we, last few months, we've offered different tools to help our listeners navigate the wisdom and what we're sharing. This month, back by popular demand, we have a special discount for our listeners to have a Kabbalistic astrology reading. This is only for Weekly Energy Boost listeners. You can go to weeklyenergyboost.com, and there is a link there. You can click the link, and with the coupon code, get 20% off Kabbalistic astrology readings. This is which is beyond helpful. I mean, look at Yehuda shared actually something at the beginning of the show that he was able to understand about his soul's journey and why he chose his family. I learned a lot, not only about my parents and my siblings through these readings, but also my spouse and my children. So I cannot recommend this enough. And the offer will be available only this month. So it's important that you, even if you can't make the appointment this month, you at least schedule it for next month or the month after, and make it happen with the discount code that's available at weeklyenergyboost.com. And throughout the month, we'll share more of what you can get from doing those readings and how not only your family can benefit, but of course you as a person can. And we are even going to have a Kabbalistic astrologer on the show this month to share more about how that can work for you. Yehuda, thank you for being with me today, not letting me be alone in the studio. And you can follow Yehuda on all platforms. He's a really amazing teacher. He's an amazing writer. He's an amazing friend and person as well.
And neighbor.
And neighbor. Of course, we're neighbors as well. I tend to bring my neighbors onto the show, right? You'll see that as you continue the journey with us. Anyways, thank you all for listening, for rating, reviewing, liking, and sharing. We are on all podcast apps, YouTube, and all social media channels as well. You can follow us on Instagram and see additional content that we offer there, Weekly Energy Boost, at Weekly Energy Boost. And we'll see you next week on the Weekly Energy Boost.